The school bell echoed through the halls of Westbridge Academy, its sharp chime slicing through the morning chatter of students. Sunlight spilled across the polished floors, bouncing off the tall windows that lined the corridors. Westbridge wasn't just any school. It was a place of prestige, a place where the wealthy sent their children to ensure they grew up surrounded by influence and opportunity. Uniforms were crisp, shoes were polished, and the laughter that echoed through the hallways carried a certain arrogance that only privilege seemed to allow. Yet among these children of CEOs and senators, Octabo who didn't quite fit in. His uniform, though clean, was second-hand, the fabric a little faded from too many washes. His shoes, though polished, carried scuffs that no shine could erase. His name was Michael. 14 years old, quiet, polite, the kind of student who never caused trouble but who always seemed invisible in the sea of wealth around him. Michael came from a working-class family, raised by his father alone after his mother passed away years earlier. His father worked long hours, sometimes 2 jobs, to afford the tuition. It was a sacrifice Michael knew weighed heavily, but his father always told him education was the greatest gift he could give. So Michael studied hard, sat in the front row, and dreamed quietly of a future he could build through effort alone. But in a school like Westbridge, effort was often overshadowed by appearance, and humility was mistaken for weakness. That morning, Michael sat in his literature class, his books stacked neatly, his notes meticulously organized. The teacher, Mrs. Hawthorne, was a woman whose reputation for strictness was rivaled only by her pride in the academy's standards. To her, Westbridge was not just a school, but a sanctuary of excellence, and anyone who didn't fit her vision of refinement was a blemish. She scanned the room with her sharp eyes, heels clicking as she walked between the rows of desks. Her gaze lingered on Michael longer than anyone else, as if his very presence disrupted the perfect picture she wanted to present. When she asked the students to hand in their essays, Michael hesitated for a moment, then pulled out his paper creased at the edges, not printed but handwritten carefully in pen because he didn't own a printer. The words were thoughtful, the handwriting neat, but to Mrs. Hawthorne, the appearance spoke louder than the effort. She held it up between her fingers, as though it were something unpleasant, her lips curling. "What is this?" she asked, her voice laced with disdain. The class grew silent. Michael swallowed hard. "My essay, ma'am," he said softly. The students began to whisper, some chuckling under their breath. Mrs. Hawthorne's eyes narrowed. "This," she said coldly, "isn't acceptable. At Westbridge, we expect standards, typed, formatted, presented properly. Do you think anyone will take you seriously if you hand them scraps of paper like this?" Michael's face flushed. I don't have a printer at home, ma'am. But I wrote everything carefully." "The content is," she cut him off, her voice sharp. "Excuses, always excuses. If you cannot meet basic expectations, perhaps you do not belong here." The words hit harder than any blow. Laughter rippled through the class, some students covering their mouths, others not even bothering. Michael's chest tightened, humiliation burning behind his eyes. He wanted to explain, to defend himself, but the words refused to come. Mrs. Hawthorne walked to her desk, dropped his essay onto it as though discarding trash, and with a cold finality said, "Leave. You are dismissed from my class. Go to the principal's office. We will discuss your future at this school." The room froze. No one had expected her to go that far, but no one spoke up either. And so Michael stood, his chair scraping against the floor, his hands trembling as he gathered his things. He walked toward the door, his classmates' laughter following like daggers. "If you believe that no child should be humiliated for trying, that effort matters more than wealth, then take a moment right now to like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to this channel. Together, we can remind the world that true education is about compassion, not cruelty, and that no one deserves to be shamed for what they lack." Michael sat quietly outside the principal's office, his essay clutched in his hands, the words he had poured his heart into now feeling worthless. Minutes felt like hours until the office door finally opened. But it wasn't the principal who stepped out. It was his father. Michael's heart skipped. His father's work boots were still dusty, his shirt a little worn, evidence that he had rushed straight from his job without stopping. But his presence carried a quiet strength, a dignity that years of sacrifice had carved into his being. "Dad," Michael whispered, confused. His father knelt beside him, eyes gentle. "I was called," he said softly. Mrs. Hawthorne said there was a problem. Michael lowered his head, shame weighing him down. "I try. Dad, I really try." His father squeezed his shoulder. "I know, son. I know." Together, they entered the office. Mrs. Hawthorne was already there, arms crossed, her expression cold. "This boy," she began, "is not suited for Westbridge. He cannot meet the basic expectations of this institution. It would be better if he transferred elsewhere." The principal, sitting stiffly behind his desk, shifted uncomfortably, clearly uneasy but unwilling to challenge her. Michael's father listened silently, his jaw tightening with each word. Then, slowly, he straightened. The weariness of a working man melted away, replaced by something else, an authority that demanded attention. His voice, when he finally spoke, was calm but carried a weight that filled the room. "Do you know who I am?" Mrs. Hawthorne blinked, caught off guard. "A laborer, I assume," she said, dismissively. The principal paled, sensing something she clearly did not. Michael's father stepped closer, his gaze steady. "My name is David Carter." The room went still. The principal's eyes widened. Mrs. Hawthorne frowned, not yet understanding. But the name carried weight far beyond those walls. David Carter, the man who owned one of the largest construction firms in the state, a company that had built not only half the city's skyline but the very building they were standing in. A man known, not just for his wealth but for his philanthropy, for funding scholarships, hospitals, and yes, schools, including Westbridge Academy. Mrs. Hawthorne's face drained of color as realization dawned. David Carter wasn't just another parent. He was the benefactor without whom Westbridge would not exist. And the boy she had humiliated was his son. The silence that followed was deafening. David's voice remained calm, but each word struck like a hammer. "You look at my son and you see second-hand shoes, a handwritten paper, and you think that makes him less. But what you fail to see is his heart, his effort, his determination. And if this school values appearance over substance, then it is this institution that does not belong to him, not the other way around." Mrs. Hawthorne stammered, her arrogance crumbling. I didn't realize." "No," David interrupted, his voice sharp now. "You didn't care, and that is far worse." The principal tried to intervene, mumbling about misunderstandings, but David raised a hand, silencing him. "Westbridge was founded on values of excellence, yes. But excellence without compassion is nothing but arrogance dressed in gold. If a teacher cannot recognize the worth of a student who works harder than most, then perhaps it is not the student who should leave." Mrs. Hawthorne's lips parted, but no words came. Her authority, her pride, had collapsed in the face of truth. The principal, desperate to salvage the moment, assured David that Michael would remain at the school, that the incident would be addressed, but the damage was done. Everyone in that office knew the balance of power had shifted. And Michael, standing quietly beside his father, realized something profound. His father hadn't raised his voice, he hadn't flaunted his wealth. He had simply spoken truth with dignity, and it was enough to turn humiliation into victory. When they left the office, the whispers in the hallway spread quickly. Students who had laughed earlier now avoided Michael's gaze, shame softening their expressions. Some even murmured apologies. For the first time, Michael didn't feel invisible. He felt seen, not because of his father's name, but because of the strength his father had shown, the reminder that worth is never measured by what you own but by who you are. That evening, at home, Michael's father placed a hand on his shoulder. "You don't need to prove yourself to people who measure by the wrong standards," he said. "You just keep doing your best. That's all that matters." Michael nodded, his heart swelling with gratitude. The humiliation of that morning no longer weighed him down. Instead, he carried with him a lesson that would last forever, that even in the face of cruelty, truth has the power to silence arrogance, and dignity will always outshine pride. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that no child should ever be judged for what they lack, take a moment now to like this video, share it with friends, and subscribe to this channel. And before you leave, comment below. What would you have done if you were in that classroom? Would you have stood up for Michael? Would you have spoken against the unfairness? Your words might inspire someone else to act with courage when the moment comes, to defend dignity, and to remind the world that compassion will always be stronger than cruelty.